Hello, I'm Eric Schaumburg with Schaumburg Specialties Company. We're the manufacturer of shop craft racks. That's all kinds of pan racks and oven racks for the commercial bakery and other industries too. We will custom make anything you would need. I want to talk a little bit today about how to select the right caster for your bakery racks. And as part of almost every piece of non-powered mobile equipment, casters and wheels play a humble but very important function in that object. From the office chair you sit on to the most sophisticated piece of custom specialized equipment, mobility or movement almost always plays a large part. This includes shopcraft pan racks and oven racks. So to begin with, I'm going to start with a little basic caster and wheel instruction. Caster is made up of two basic components. The first, there's the bracket, sometimes called the rig or the yoke. Okay, and then there's the wheel. On top of that, there's a mounting device that mounts the caster to the object that is being moved. The mounting plate, sometimes the mounting device, sometimes it comes in two basic types. You've got a plate and you've got a stem. This is the basic types of caster mounting. The second part to the caster is the wheel. This is the part that supports the load while rolling in the direction of travel. So, to select the correct caster, and when I use the word caster, it includes the whole thing, the wheel and the bracket, with the mounting device, whether that be swivel or stem. There's a series of factors that need to be considered. Some of these factors include the load capacity, the mounting device, the wheel diameter, whether the caster is swivel or a rigid fixed type, the wheel type, meaning the material that the wheel's made out of, the wheel bearing, options such as brakes, thread guards, wheel seals, grease fittings, external factors, which might mean the atmosphere that it's working in or the floor condition, and price. So in my presentation today, I'm mostly going to focus on bakery racks as an object to select a caster for. Often, you might not even have the option to select the caster for the rack, because the rack has been designed specifically with a caster in mind for a right capacity, for the operating conditions, and you may just not have the option of selecting the caster of your choice. But in the case of Shopcraft and Schaumburg Specialties, you do have options in the type of caster and wheel selected for your racks. The reason being is that most Shopcraft racks are made to order, and that's order for you. If you are just buying one or two racks, it may not be worth the effort to request a special or different caster because it may increase the price above your budget. But let's just say you want to standardize all your racks in your bakery with Shopcraft racks and optimize each rack with the best caster for the specific use of that rack. Let's start with oven racks. Typically, oven racks require a caster and a wheel that will sustain the high temperature and harsh conditions of the oven. Most caster brackets will stand up to the normal oven temperatures and baking times. This includes both stainless steel, the 45 HT 4138XX S3, which stands for the stainless, and the zinc-plated steel caster, 45 HT 4138 XX03. Stainless steel caster bracket will have a longer life. It's not typically affected by corrosion or rust, while the zinc-plated version is more cost-effective. Both of these casters are sized for the required height of a typical oven rack and have a capacity of about 350 pounds per caster. Oftentimes, the capacity of a caster is determined by the type of wheel. Often, with the harsh environments of a baking oven, a great option is to request a heavy-duty caster like our 70 series caster. This is available in zinc-plated or stainless steel, but has a larger overall height, a wider wheel, and a higher capacity. That's the difference in the two. Okay. All this does for you in buying this heavier caster is it extends the life of the caster. The caster will last longer than the lighter duty caster. The information above can be applied to the Shopcraft aluminum or stainless steel pan racks. One consideration for a cooler rack or freezer rack is the addition of freezer grease or high performance grease. With the general purpose caster, the supplied grease in the swivel bearing of the caster is usually a lower grade grease that will sometimes freeze or become stiff when submitted to low temperatures. But let's go back to the basic considerations of specifying a caster. First consideration is load capacity. You'll need to know or have a reasonable idea of the load of the cart, what the load of the cart will be. Once that has been established, then you can divide that number by the number of casters that will be used, giving a single caster weight capacity. Once the capacity of the caster has been established, next decide how it is to be attached. As a rule of thumb, the higher the caster capacity, the longer the life of the caster. So how are you going to attach it? Now, we've talked about mounting device, and that's what I'm talking about right now. Stem versus plate. Shopcraft racks typically choose a plate caster as the preferred mounting style. We feel that the plate method is more secure design in supporting the swivel bearings. Stem casters are acceptable, but often put additional stress on the structure that holds the caster. Wheel diameter is the next point. How big is the diameter, should the diameter be? Well, the size of the wheel is a key factor. Often, the larger the wheel diameter, the better the larger the wheel, the better the object will roll. That's another rule of thumb. Most often, if a small wheel is specified, the object will not roll as well, requiring more effort to move, especially if there's rough surfaces or loose objects on the floor, such as stones or metal chips or any type of debris. Sometimes a combination of swivel and rigid casters are used to provide more positive movement of the object. Depending on the configuration and design, sometimes all rigid casters can be used. Other times, 2 swivel and 2 rigid casters can provide a steerable option. Many times, all swivel casters are used if maneuverability is desired. But generally speaking, if the object is square or close to square, as a bakery rack, all swivel casters provide the best results. Wheel type. The wheel type is usually selected by the conditions in which the caster is to be used. In the case of Shopcraft oven racks, we recommend the recommended choice is a non-metallic high-temperature glass-filled nylon, high-temperature phenolic, or high-temperature epoxy resin. Steel wheels are not often recommended because in a food production facility, the floors are often epoxy coated, and a steel wheel can damage the coating of the floor. Other considerations in selecting wheel type are if a softer or quieter rolling movement is desired. A softer wheel, such as a polyurethane or rubber wheel, can be used. Most often, though, in Shopcraft pan racks, we use a polyolefin wheel because of its durability and economical cost. There are many other types of wheels that can add color, aesthetics to your workplace environment, in addition to providing a great roll. If capacity is your need, a hard wheel such as a phenolic or a steel wheel is a great choice. Often the harder the wheel material, the better the rollability. In wet environments or wet conditions, we prefer a solid polyolefin. This is just a high-density polyethylene wheel, I believe, is what it is. Has great resistance to moisture, animal fats, chemicals, while providing a good roll, and is economical. Bearings. Caster wheel bearing is another consideration. There are basically 3 options for caster wheel bearings. You got the plain bearing. This is just a sleeve that the wheel revolves around, like this here. Oftentimes, it's a very simple bearing, the best choice, because there's few moving parts to get dirt and grit into, causing the bearing to seize or to fail. The roller bearing is another good choice. It's quite common in your general purpose casters, and it works well. Rollability needs to improve up from there. From the plain bearing, often there's a ball bearing. This is probably the best of the caster wheel bearings, the best rollability. But what we find is that if conditions are wet or dirty, such as the bakery, or corrosive environments are sometimes a factor, these don't last as long as a simpler bearing like a plain bearing, and can offer a satisfactory rollability while increasing the life of the caster. Options. Options such as brakes, thread guards, bearing seals, grease fittings, all considerations to increase the function and lifespan of a caster. Brakes are probably the most requested option. And depending on the caster series, some very positive and effective brakes are available. However, on the lighter series casters, the cheaper brakes are often not as effective or don't remain effective for very long. Other factors are the external factors, like area a caster is expected to perform in, also needs to be considered. If the caster is to operate indoors or on a soft surface such as a carpet, will also be considerations. And lastly, price. One way to provide a less expensive bakery rack is to use an inexpensive caster. While this is usually one consideration that is overlooked, at Schaumburg Specialties, a Shopcraft rack is an investment. You may pay more for our racks, but the value offered far outweighs the additional cost. We build racks and custom equipment to last a lifetime and to provide the very best service for you. So I just wanted to show a few samples of what we work with here. Again, we have the 2 types of casters. You've got the mounting device, plate or stem. You've got a different type of stem. There's lots of different stems available depending on the design of the object or what you want to use. We have our typical glass-filled nylon wheel. This has got the plain bearing in it. It's a very, very simple bearing. It's just got the sleeve bearing. It goes together like that. Okay, and the caster rotates around there. Then you have a lube axle, which all our oven racks do have lube axles in them, just like this one here, just like that. And often I'd like to point out that you can get away with just replacing the wheel when the bracket is still suitable. If this bracket still swivels nicely, there's no problems with the swivel bearing, and the wheel is cracked or damaged, you can take the old wheel out and replace it with a new wheel, bushing, and an axle. and it's very easy to do and can put you back in business quicker and easier than trying to replace all the fasteners, which sometimes get stuck on. Even though we do use stainless steel fasteners in all of our Shopcraft racks, there still can be difficult to remove and replace. Although they will not rust, it can be kind of a challenge. Just like to point out the high temp epoxy wheel. Lots of opinions in the baking industry as to which kind of wheel works best. This is a more expensive wheel, and it actually has a ball bearing in it, which rolls very nice. But it's a little more expensive, but some people really like this wheel. So that's that. Again, I will talk about the heavier caster. Now, this, in my opinion, is a good choice. If you're going to buy a lot of oven racks over the course of years and use them hard, to specify a caster of this size and configuration with the high temp wheel and the grease fitting there, this is a really good choice. I would recommend persons always specifying this wheel. It does add more cost to it, but again, it's an investment. And grease. We suggest that that grease is applied to the casters on a regular basis. We believe that this will extend the life of the caster. We know it's difficult. It's hard to do. It can be difficult for maintenance to do this on a regular basis. But we just buy this typical needle fitting from the auto parts store, and then just go into the swivel race. There's typically, on the lighter series caster, there is no grease fitting. There is no grease fitting on the swivel race like there is in the bigger, heavier series. Okay, so that has a grease zerk, but the lighter duty casters do not. So the only way you can get grease into there is by putting it in with some sort of a tool, and that's what we use. We also have high temperature grease for oven racks, and then we have what we call a high temp extreme grease. This is high performance grease. This works good for both the freezer and the oven. It's got high temperature and low temperature qualities to it. So if you've got trouble with grease freezing in the oven, in the freezer, then this freezer grease, as we call it, is an option. And lastly, I'd like to talk about wheels in the freezer. Sometimes people think that they need to get a special wheel for the freezer. I don't believe that you need a special wheel for the freezer. I believe that the only consideration for a freezer is the type of grease that is in the bearing that makes the swivel or the wheel freeze up. This is the part that will freeze in a freezer. So when you go to pull it, it will not swivel and therefore doesn't roll very well until it warms up a bit. Well, that's what I have to say about casters and wheels. So, Schaumburg Specialties should be your only source for Shopcraft, Spacecraft, Metacraft, and Intellicraft. We will utilize our experience and knowledge of the industry to provide the very best for what you need in your application. Whether it is in a baking application or an industrial application, we will put our experience to work for you.